Most people think Alaska is just Denali, bears, and cruise ships docking in Juneau. And sure, those are fine. But Alaska has over 663,000 square miles, and the tourist trail covers maybe 2% of it. The rest? Petroglyphs on coastal beaches, towns that have flown 4 different flags, hot springs sitting under the northern lights, and islands that have more Kodiak bears than people. Here are 30 places in Alaska you'll wish you found sooner. Place 30, Wrangell. Wrangell doesn't advertise itself much, and doesn't need to. It's one of the oldest non-native settlements in Alaska, founded by Russian traders in 1834, and the only town in Alaska to have been ruled by 4 nations: the Tlingit, Russia, Britain, and the United States. What draws people who find it is Petroglyph Beach State Historic Site, half a mile from the ferry terminal, a rocky shoreline with carvings estimated to be over 8,000 years old, spirals, fish, faces, whales, cut into stone before most ancient civilizations existed. Check tide tables first. Many petroglyphs go underwater at high tide. On the other side of town is Chief Shakes Island, a small harbor island with a replica Tlingit clan house and 6 totem poles. The original house posts, among the oldest still in existence, are at the Wrangell Museum. Famous visitors over the years included John Muir, Wyatt Earp, briefly a volunteer marshal, and the outlaw Soapy Smith, who used Wrangell as a hideout when Skagway turned too uncomfortable. Ravens on the town's 9-hole golf course steal golf balls, having mistaken them for eggs. Place 29, Chena Hot Springs. About 60 miles northeast of Fairbanks, down Chena Hot Springs Road, there is a geothermal resort that has been drawing visitors since 1912, when people traveled there by horse-drawn stage from town. The spring water rises from the earth at 165 degrees Fahrenheit, cools into an outdoor pond rimmed with boulders, and sits open through temperatures that drop well below zero in winter. The outdoor pool in sub-zero temperatures with northern lights overhead is its own category of experience. The resort runs aurora viewing tours in winter and holds the Aurora Ice Museum, fashioned entirely from about 1,000 tons of ice and operating year-round as the largest permanent ice environment in the world. The ice sculptures inside are carved by artists who compete internationally, and the whole structure stays frozen through summer using a refrigeration system beneath the floor. It's accessible as a day trip from Fairbanks or as a longer stay, and it operates across all 4 seasons, which is more than you can say for most places in the interior. Place 28, Nome. Nome is on the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula, 539 miles northwest of Anchorage, and it is the finish line of the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race, a roughly 1,000-mile race that starts in Anchorage each March, officially restarts in Willow, and arrives in Nome under the famous Burled Arch on Front Street as early as 8 days later. When the mushers come in, Nome's population swells by around 1,000 people, and locals call it the Mardi Gras of the North. That's the modern Nome. The historic one started in 1898 when gold was discovered at Anvil Creek by 3 Swedish prospectors. By 1899, the beach sands themselves turned out to contain gold, and that triggered what historians consider the last major gold rush in American history. Nome briefly became the largest city in Alaska, with an estimated 20,000 people on its shores. Today, it has about 3,500 residents and a few gold dredges left sitting on the tundra as monuments to that boom. Wyatt Earp showed up during the gold rush, as he seemed to do everywhere. The saloon row he visited on Front Street is, technically, still a saloon row. Place 27, Petersburg. Petersburg, about 110 miles north of Ketchikan in the Inside Passage, was founded by Norwegian immigrant Peter Bushman in 1897. Little Norway takes that name seriously. Every May, the town holds a 4-day Norwegian Constitution Day celebration, locally called Mayfest, reported to be more enthusiastic than many Norwegian American events anywhere in the country. The harbor is working industry, not backdrop. Petersburg consistently ranks among the top producers of salmon, halibut, shrimp, and Dungeness crab in Alaska. LeConte Glacier, accessible by boat from town, is the southernmost active tidewater glacier in North America and calves icebergs regularly into LeConte Bay. That's a spectacle you can watch without sharing it with 400 other people. Place 26. Sitka. Sitka sits on the western edge of Baranof Island, facing the open Pacific Ocean, and it has a history that's different from any other Alaskan city. It was the capital of Russian America, the colonial headquarters of the Russian-American Company, until 1867, when the United States purchased Alaska for $7.2 million. The formal transfer ceremony happened here on October 18, 1867. That date is now Alaska Day, a state holiday. The Russian influence is still physical. St. Michael's Cathedral is a working Russian Orthodox church, the original built in 1848, rebuilt after a 1966 fire. The Sitka National Historical Park marks the site of an 1804 battle between Tlingit and Russian forces and holds one of the finest totem pole collections in southeast Alaska, set along a coastal rainforest trail. The Alaska Raptor Center rehabilitates over 200 injured raptors annually in the largest bird flight training facility in the country. Place 25. Kodiak Island. Kodiak is the second largest island in the United States, stretching over 100 miles long, and 2/3 of it is set aside as a national wildlife refuge. That refuge is home to an estimated 3,000 Kodiak bears, a subspecies of brown bear that has lived in genetic isolation on the Kodiak archipelago for over 10,000 years and is the largest subspecies of bear in the world. They can stand over 10 feet tall on their hind legs. The salmon runs here are so dense that Kodiak bears have been documented eating only the skin and roe of the fish and discarding the rest. They can afford to be picky. The town of Kodiak was the first capital of Russian Alaska before the seat of government moved to Sitka. The Baranof Museum, housed in the oldest surviving Russian building in Alaska, built in 1808, contains artifacts from that period. Fossil Beach, accessible by road, is a spot where fossils emerge at low tide, a perk that requires very little planning beyond checking a tide chart. Place 24, Skagway. Gold was found in the Klondike in 1896, and Skagway became the main gateway for the roughly 100,000 prospectors who flooded north. They braved the Chilkoot and White Pass trails, were required by Canadian authorities to carry a full year's worth of supplies, roughly a ton of gear per person, and most of them found nothing. Skagway shaped Alaskan history anyway. The historic downtown district is preserved almost entirely intact and managed by the National Park Service as part of Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park. Walking the main street is a genuinely disorienting experience. The buildings haven't changed that much. The White Pass and Yukon Route Railway, a narrow gauge line completed in 1900, still operates. The original builders had to blast and drill through 110 miles of some of the most punishing terrain in North America. The train passes waterfalls, crosses trestles over steep gorges, and climbs past the White Pass summit at 2,865 feet, all on a track that was completed in just 26 months. Place 23, Haines. Haines sits at the northern end of the Lynn Canal, the longest and deepest fjord in North America, surrounded by the Chilkat and Chilkoot mountain ranges. In fall and early winter, the Chilkat Bald Eagle Preserve outside town draws the world's largest documented concentration of bald eagles. Regularly, over 3,000 birds gathering along a stretch of the Chilkat River where warm springs keep the water from freezing, keeping late salmon runs accessible well into December. The Alaska Bald Eagle Festival in November is the annual anchor event, drawing photographers from around the world for workshops, lectures, and access to the preserve. Haines is also reachable by road, the Haines Highway, connecting it to the Alaska Highway System, which is more than you can say for most of Southeast Alaska. The Hammer Museum in town houses over 2,000 hammers, including a 20-foot-tall hammer outside. Some museums explain themselves. This one does not feel the need to. Place 22, Talkeetna. Talkeetna is at the confluence of 3 rivers about 100 miles north of Anchorage, and it's the primary staging ground for Denali climbers. The 20,310-foot mountain is visible from town on clear days. The Talkeetna Historical Society Museum documents this climbing culture alongside early aviation, gold rush history, and Athabascan heritage. For years, the town's honorary mayor was a cat named Stubbs, named for his stubby tail, born in 1997 and installed as an unofficial write-in candidate when residents were unimpressed with the actual options. Talkeetna is unincorporated and has no formal government, so Stubbs held no real authority, which may explain his 2-decade approval ratings. He died in 2017 at age 20. Talkeetna has roughly 900 residents, an outsized number of bars, and the Denali Brewing Company is based here. Place 21. Whittier. Whittier is a small port city on Prince William Sound, accessible only through the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, a 2.5-mile single-lane tunnel that was converted from rail-only use in 2000 and now alternates direction for cars on a schedule. It is the longest combined rail and highway tunnel in North America, and you do, in fact, share it with trains. The town was built by the U.S. Army during World War II as a strategic ice-free port. At its peak, most of the civilian population lived in a single 14-story building called Bagot Towers. Several hundred people still live there year-round today, including a school, laundry, post office, and church, all under one roof. From Whittier, day cruises into Prince William Sound access, Blackstone Glacier, Surprise Glacier, and dense concentrations of marine wildlife. Harbor seals, stellar sea lions, sea otters, orcas, and humpback whales are regular sightings. The access to wild glacial scenery from a place reachable by car, if you time the tunnel, is unusual for Alaska. Place 20, Valdez. Valdez sits at the head of Port Valdez on Prince William Sound, surrounded on 3 sides by the Chugach Mountains, sometimes called Little Switzerland. It receives more snowfall than almost any other community in Alaska, which makes it a destination for extreme skiing on the steep faces around town. It's also the southern terminus of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, running 800 miles from Prudhoe Bay. On March 24, 1989, the Exxon Valdez ran aground on Bly Reef 25 miles from town, spilling nearly 11 million gallons of crude oil, the largest spill in U.S. history at the time. The town itself was largely rebuilt 4 miles from its original site, which was condemned after the 1964 Good Friday earthquake. The second most powerful earthquake ever recorded at 9.2 magnitude caused the original Valdez to sink into the sea. Place 19. Hope. Hope is a small community of a few hundred people on the south shore of Turnagain Arm, about 90 miles from Anchorage. It was one of the first gold rush settlements on the Kenai Peninsula, dating to 1896, and it never really modernized beyond that in appearance or pace. The Resurrection Pass Trail beginning near Hope and running 38 miles south through the Kenai Mountains, is one of the best multi-day backpacking routes in Alaska, with Forest Service cabins spaced a day's walk apart. A historic gold dredge from the early 20th century sits in the woods outside town, largely intact, largely unfound. Place 18, Nenana. Nenana is a small town 55 miles southwest of Fairbanks on the Tanana River. In 1923, President Warren G. Harding drove the Golden Spike here, completing the Alaska Railroad, the last public act of his presidency before his death on the return trip. The 1923 Nenana Depot is on the National Register of Historic Places. The town is genuinely famous for the Nenana Ice Classic, started in 1917. A tripod is placed on the frozen Tanana River each year, and participants guess the exact time, to the minute and second, when the ice breaks up and the tripod moves. The prize pool has reached into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's watched across Alaska the way other places watch playoff games. Place 17, Delta Junction. Delta Junction is the official end of the Alaska Highway, built in 1942 to connect the lower 48 to Alaska through Canada. The original mile 1,422 marker is here. The town is real farming country set in the Tanana Valley, and it looks nothing like the standard Alaskan postcard. The Delta bison herd grazes in the surrounding area, a population that traces back to transplanted bison from the 1920s, joined by wood bison from Canada in 2015. Seeing bison on tundra with the Alaska Range visible behind them is not a combination most visitors expect. Nearby, the Granite Tors and Chena River State Recreation Area are strange volcanic rock formations standing up to 60 feet tall, scattered across open tundra like something placed there deliberately. Place 16, KK. KK is a Tlingit community on Kuprinov Island in southeast Alaska, accessible only by boat or float plane. It is quiet, it is remote, and it has a 132-foot totem pole erected in 1971 for the World's Fair in Osaka, Japan. One of the tallest totem poles in the world, standing at the edge of town near the harbor. The fishing is exceptional, the hiking is largely unmarked and undeveloped, and the surrounding landscape is the Southeast Alaska wilderness in its full, unmediated form. KK offers a version of the state that has no infrastructure aimed at tourism, which, depending on your disposition, is either the problem or the entire point. Place 15, Hoonah. Hoonah is the largest Tlingit village in Alaska on Chichagof Island across Icy Strait from Glacier Bay. The Tlingit people here were displaced by advancing glaciers roughly 250 years ago and returned after the ice retreated. That history is embedded in the culture. Icy Strait Point outside Hoonah has one of the largest seasonal concentrations of humpback whales in the world, and the whale watching is considered among the best accessible anywhere in Alaska. The cannery at Icy Strait Point, an early 20th century salmon cannery converted into a visitor facility, is the largest of its original kind still standing in Alaska. There's also a zip line that drops 1,300 feet of vertical over a mile of cable down to a beach, the largest by those specifications in North America for anyone keeping track. Place 14, McCarthy and Kennecott. McCarthy is a small town at the end of 59 miles of gravel road through Wrangell St. Elias National Park, the largest national park in the United States at 13.2 million acres, larger than 6 Yellowstones. To get from the end of the road into McCarthy, you cross a footbridge over the Kennecott River. There are no roads into the park's interior beyond this. 3 miles up from McCarthy, the ghost town of Kennecott was once the world's richest copper mine. Backed by the Guggenheim family and J.P. Morgan, the mine extracted 1.18 billion pounds of copper and paid out over $100 million in net profit between 1903 and 1938. The entire operation was abandoned in a single day, November 10th, 1938, when the last train left. Everything was left as is: machinery, furniture, office maps, personal belongings. The 14-story Red Mill building still stands on the glacier moraine. The National Park Service acquired the mill town in 1998. You can take guided tours through the buildings. A few things remain exactly where they were in 1938. Place 13, Cordova. Cordova is on the southeastern shore of Prince William Sound with no road connection to the main Alaska highway system. Ferry or small plane only, which is why it stays off most itineraries. The Copper River Delta near town fans across 700,000 acres of wetland and is one of the most critical shorebird migration stopovers in the Western Hemisphere. During the Copper River Delta Shorebird Festival each May, millions of shorebirds pass through en route to Arctic breeding grounds. The Copper River salmon, wild sockeye and king, are among the most prized in the world. The fish build up exceptional fat content because they travel over 300 miles upriver to spawn. Cordova's fishing harbor is working industry, not scenery. Place 12, Juneau, off the beaten path. Juneau is Alaska's capital and gets plenty of visitors from cruise ships. But most of them don't leave the immediate downtown area. The accessible places most visitors skip entirely include the Mendenhall Glacier's ice caves, accessible by guided tour on the glacier itself, and the East Glacier Loop Trail, which circles into old-growth forest above the valley. The glacier is retreating visibly. Photographs from the 1950s show ice where there's now open lake. The Shrine of St. Therese, a small stone chapel on a natural island reached by a causeway about 23 miles north of downtown, sits in a forest of spruce and hemlock on the edge of Lynn Canal. It was built in 1941 using stones collected by parishioners from local beaches and the surrounding islands. The woods around it are moss-covered and quiet in a way that is hard to describe without sounding excessive. Place 11, Glacier Gardens, Juneau. In the Tongass National Forest, just outside Juneau, Glacier Gardens Rainforest Adventure is a privately owned garden where the centerpiece is a collection of upside-down trees, Sitka spruce and hemlock blown over by storms, their root balls planted into the ground, pointing skyward with flowering baskets growing from the roots. The resulting towers of flowers are 20 to 30 feet tall. The idea came from owner Steve Bohe after a storm in 1995 knocked over dozens of trees on his property. Rather than clearing them, he planted them inverted. The garden now covers about 50 acres of rainforest and is toured by tram. It's one of the more genuinely peculiar and beautiful things in Southeast Alaska. Place 10, Matanuska Glacier. The Matanuska Glacier is one of the largest road-accessible glaciers in the United States, 27 miles long, 4 miles wide, about 100 miles northeast of Anchorage off the Glen Highway. You can drive to the edge and walk onto its surface. Unlike most Alaskan glaciers that require flights or boats, this one you can reach in a car. The blue ice deep inside crevasses is a compressed color caused by ice old enough to have nearly all air pressed out of it. Guided tours go into crevasse areas using ladders and ropes, and the scale is disorienting once you're inside. You can spend a full day on a single glacier and cover very little of it. Place 9, Lake Hood. Lake Hood is directly adjacent to Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport in the middle of the city, and it is the busiest floatplane base in the world. On peak summer days, over 800 floatplane operations take place. The planes land and take off from the water surface, taxi to docks, and depart again constantly, while commercial jets take off over them on the main runway. Watching this from the public viewing areas on the lake's shoreline is free. The connection between float plane travel and daily life in Alaska, accessing remote villages, fishing camps, hunting grounds, and wilderness lodges, is more concentrated and visible here than anywhere else. Alaska has more registered pilots per capita than any other state, and this is where much of that flying life is concentrated in one place. Place 8, Seward. Seward is a port town on the eastern Kenai Peninsula that functions as the primary gateway to Kenai Fjords National Park, but the town itself is overlooked in favor of the boats that leave from it. The Alaska Sea Life Center here is the only public aquarium in the state and the only marine mammal rescue and research facility in Alaska. Stellar sea lions, harbor seals, puffins, octopuses, and salmon are all on view, and the rehabilitation programs for injured marine animals are ongoing. Seward also hosts the Mount Marathon Race on the 4th of July, a foot race that has been run annually since 1915. Competitors run up and back down a 3,022-foot mountain as fast as possible. Record times are under 44 minutes. It has a reputation for genuine brutality, and every year it produces injuries from the rocky descent that remind participants what a mountain is. Place 7, Homer. Homer sits at the end of the Sterling Highway on the Kenai Peninsula on Kachemak Bay, with a spit of land stretching 4.5 miles into the water that contains the harbor, a concentration of shops and restaurants, and views of the Kenai Mountains and Gruint Glacier across the bay. It calls itself the halibut fishing capital of the world, which is a self-proclaimed title, but not a dishonest one. The charter fishing industry here is substantial, and the halibut caught in the bay are large. The Pratt Museum in town is a natural history museum focused on the Kachemak Bay area that includes exhibits on the Exxon Valdez oil spill, a saltwater aquarium, and cultural history of the Knightley Indian tribe. Across the bay, reachable by water taxi, the small community of Halibut Cove is accessible only by boat and contains a handful of galleries, a lagoon with floating boardwalks, and no roads. Bald eagles there are largely unbothered by humans. Place 6, Aniakchak National Monument. Aniakchak is on the Alaska Peninsula, 450 miles southwest of Anchorage, and the least visited unit in the entire national park system. In most years, fewer than 150 people go. The centerpiece is a 6-mile-wide volcanic caldera containing Surprise Lake, which drains through a gap called the Gates into the Aniakchak River. Visitors fly into the caldera from King Salmon, float the river, and exit to the Pacific coast. No trails, no services, no other people. The weather is among the worst in Alaska, and bears are constant. The land is geologically violent, and almost no one sees it. Place 5, Sitka's Fortress of the Bear. Back in Sitka, because one entry wasn't enough, the Fortress of the Bear is a nonprofit sanctuary for orphaned brown bear cubs that would otherwise be euthanized after their mothers are killed. It houses a rotating population of Alaska brown bears in large naturalistic enclosures, and viewing is close and direct. These are not performing bears or sedated exhibits. They're rehabilitated animals that grew up in the facility. Founded in 2007, the sanctuary has placed bears in zoos and helped establish protocols for orphan bear care across the state. For a view of brown bears in a context where their behavior is observable without a helicopter or a remote riverbank, this is one of the better options in Alaska. Place 4, Yakutat. Yakutat is a remote coastal community in southeastern Alaska, accessible by air, sitting next to Yakutat Bay where Hubbard Glacier terminates, the longest tidewater glacier in North America at roughly 76 miles. Hubbard Glacier is one of the